What's up, guys? I'm Joe. Today I'm talking about the new album from A Perfect Circle, Eat the Elephant. So, A Perfect Circle is back. This is their fourth studio album, and it has actually been 14 years since their last record. It definitely doesn't seem that long to me. Looking back, 2004 does not seem like it's 14 years ago. This is just completely shocking. But when I realized that this was coming out after so long, it just begged the question of what the group was going to sound like 14 years later. The group features Maynard James Keenan on vocals, also known for his work with the band Tool, a band that also hasn't had an album in so long, and I think the fact that you hear so often about Tool, and how it's been like 12 years or so since the last record, that almost kind of made me forget that it's been longer for A Perfect Circle. Also features Billy Howerdel on guitars on this album, a lot of pianos. They're really the songwriting collaborators of this record. And yeah, I was super curious, what do you do after 14 years? I feel like when you have a group that's releasing albums consistently, you see a sort of natural progression in their sound for the most part. Sometimes bands throw you for a loop and do something that's completely out there, but usually you could see a band's change in sound over time. But when it's been so long, like, what do you really do next? What he was saying, and I tend to agree, is that if you're trying to really capture that original sound, and it's just not going to really pay off. Look no further than that opening track for something that, most fans, certainly me, I did not expect going into it. It starts with like a piano, jazzy drum kind of feel to it, but mostly throughout the song is very sparse, piano, maybe some bass, some like just moving drums, and Maynard's vocals. And that sparse kind of piano sound continues on the album and adds a sort of longing type feel to the songs. In Disillusioned, for example, the verses have a really nice drive to it. Some lighter guitars floating around in the background, and I really like Maynard's delivery on here. But then when you get into the chorus, it goes into this very sparse sounding piano section, and the way the notes are just so lightly being hit, and following Maynard's vocals throughout. It leaves me sort of on the edge of my seat, like I'm waiting for the next part to come. As the notes get more and more sparse, you're just like, it has this feeling of yearning to it. And that's a type of style that's sort of explored on the Doomed, another single as well. And I think the way the drums are pounding and rolling really amp things up before it goes into this little spacey section again, and then like slowly makes its way into, it feels like it's resetting the song, getting right back into that opening section. The Contrarian, another great track. It opens with this mystical sounding acoustic guitar. I love how the song really builds in its sound and its atmosphere. That sort of adds to that, grand feel of a lot of these songs, the way they do build up. They start fairly, not straightforward musically, I guess, but straightforward as far as their instrumentation. These songs might start with just like a simple guitar, bass line, around some piano and the vocals, and they just really build and build and build. And while they might not get super intense, sometimes they do. You get glimpses in some of these songs, such as, in TalkTalk, or in Delicious or Hourglass, of that older aggression and something you would expect from Maynard James Keenan. But, for the most part, these songs are like slow burners, slow builds. And, that sort of orchestration, that instrumentation, I think is pretty effective. But you're getting that on the Contrarian as well. When it builds, it gets into that cool kind of chorus, choir-sounding section, which I think is pretty cool. So Long and Thanks for the Fish. Probably the most bizarre song on here, only because it's so out there for the band, I feel, or really anything Maynard's done. It's so like uplifting sounding. It has a sort of anthemic, dare I say, U2 kind of feel to it. There's some great orchestrated moments going on here as well. A song that I was sort of thrown off by at first, but has definitely grown on me in multiple listens. And when you kind of dig into the lyrical content of it, some, are saying that, maybe it's sarcastic in a way. The, uplifting sound of it is kind of a ruse. And when you look into the lyrics, it's much more sardonic and cynical. It's kind of pointing out some of the more absurdities of life, which I think a lot of the songs do on here. Speaking of lyrics, I did forget to mention the lyrics in the Doomed I really do like. Those opening lines, behold a new Christ, behold the same old horde, sort of gathering to worship this new figure. I think, it speaks a lot to, modern politics especially. I think, people on both sides of the aisle, they just move on to the next candidate every election cycle, and people are extremely alienated to one side over the other, and I think this song speaks to that very well. Even though these figures that we tend to start to worship in a way aren't really looking out for our best interests anyway. TalkTalk, again, kind of, playing on the sort of religious metaphors and connotations, which I think is really well done. The talk like Jesus, how about you walk like Jesus, something like that, which I think is a really, great delivery. People that kind of, build themselves up to be so great, don't actually, you talk the talk, but do you walk the walk kind of thing, don't actually, show through their actions that they are really, should be esteemed in this way. And I think, this chorus is one of my favorites on the album. Some of that older Perfect Circle aggression, something you would expect more so from them. Little moments like this do stand out to me. I do like those more aggressive tendencies in some of the songs here. Buying Down the River, a bit of a remake of a song they had released, Buying Down, with a greatest hits package that came out a couple years ago, I think. For the most part, the song's pretty much the same. It does seem to be either mixed differently or it was re-recorded. The drums are a little less busy, I guess. Vocals in the beginning sound a little auto-tuned, which I find kind of strange. I don't really like that. And, the guitars seem to be kind of moved a little bit more to the background. But I think that does fit with the sound of the record. So that's not, a big distractor for me. I do like the song, and glad to see it on here. I think that works pretty well. Delicious, I think, is an interesting song because it kind of sounds like some of their older stuff, but it's done so with more acoustic instrumentation, which gives it much more of a unique feel, and it fits the tone of the record. Later, it goes into some really, great, there's just an acoustic guitar with, like, some strings on top of it. Really fantastic stuff. This is one of my favorites on here as well. Hourglass, kind of a cool one too, is more of like an industrial electronic feel. You hear a little bit of that too on Get the Let Out, the closing track, which, the closing track's definitely a weird one. I feel like the album sort of properly ends with Feathers, which is a pretty epic, grand sounding song, just a really great one. And then Get the Let Out kind of takes you on this weird sort of epilogue type thing. Feathers does a good job as well, like, of that kind of slow build that, many of these songs do on the record. And overall, it's just a really effective track as well. So, I think this is actually a great album. What I would recommend, if you're turned off by the sound of it at first, which I sort of was, definitely give it a couple listens. After a few, you're going to start to, see that these songs will stick. You're going to start to hear some of the intricacies in the music that I think are really great. And I agree with Maynard James Keenan. I don't think it would have been the right move to try to recreate those first two records or anything like that. It would have seemed too forced. I feel like when bands do that, it doesn't usually turn out well. I think you got to just follow what's right for, you musically at the time, not really force anything. So what you end up with here are a collection of, pretty eclectic songs from the band. I think lyrically very effective, and I think thematically and musically very well done. Not the biggest fan of the album cover. I don't think it paints a very good picture of what you should expect on here, and, I don't know about it. But yeah, let me know what you think of the album in the comments, whether I'm right, whether I'm wrong. I forgot to rate it. I'm going to give this one a strong 4 out of 5. So yeah, thanks for watching. As always, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you all next time.